Allison crossed the room and opened the door at the far end. She had a second to realize she was staring at a blank rock wall. The door didn't go anywhere. Then the floor dropped out from under her feet, and she heard Balthazar whinny in startled fright before she was going down with him in a flailing heap, and a flying hoof caught her on the head. Allison woke up with her head ice-cold clear and a horrible taste in her mouth. A smiling, white-bearded man was standing up from her side with a small brown glass bottle in his hand. "There, all better," he said, and she eyed him sidelong. He didn't really look like the evil wizard type, until she noticed her wrists were chained to the wall. That was more supporting evidence than she had really needed. Balthazar was chained next to her, and the light had gone out of his horn. He bent his head and nosed at her anxiously as the wizard went to put the bottle back on one of his crammed full shelves. The wizard puttered over a smoking cauldron in the middle of the room. "Are you all right?" Balthazar hissed. "No," Allison said. Whatever Otto the wizard had given her, it wasn't anywhere near as nice as getting sobered up by a unicorn. Her head wasn't hurting exactly, but it didn't feel like everything on the inside was lined up right either. She dragged herself to sit upright against the wall, chains rattling. Otto straightened up from the cauldron and waved a wand at the back wall of the room, muttering. It slid aside, and a few small voices cried, "Balthazar! Balthazar!" The baby unicorns were penned up in an iron cage, 6 of them crowded in together, looking sad and matted down and scared. All right, stop bleeding. That's not going to help anyone," Balthazar said, pawing the ground with a hoof and sending up sparks. "All right, wizard, stop being an ass. You can't make yourself immortal by sacrificing baby unicorns." Otto laughed without looking up from the new stuff he was throwing into the cauldron. "I know the baby unicorns aren't enough," he said. "Fortunately, I now have a grown unicorn, and its chosen virgin." "Oh my God," Allison said. "I'm not, ow!" Balthazar had just kicked her in the thigh. "Would you believe," Otto said, "it's harder to find a virgin than a unicorn in this city?" "People get very suspicious if you start hanging around teenage girls. I even tried Craigslist. But I'm reasonably sure all of the responders were lying." "Well, I'm shocked," Allison said. And then she started scrambling up, braced against the wall, because Otto was coming over with a bowl and a very sharp knife. "Don't worry," Otto said cheerily. "I only need a little bit at this stage. The actual sacrifice will be extremely painful, of course," he added, "but that won't be for a few hours yet." The chains were pulling tight, dragging her wrists up over her head. "That had better be a clean knife," Allison managed, her throat dry, as Otto reached up to cut a thin, shallow slice across her upper arm, holding the bowl underneath. "Oh, completely sterile," Otto assured her seriously, and carried the bowl of blood over to the cauldron. The chains eased up and came loose again. "You really aren't?" Balthazar whispered to her anxiously, "because this would be a bad time to find out." "I'm really not," Allison whispered. "Good, then you should probably," Balthazar began, and then Otto tipped the blood into the cauldron, and the whole thing went up into a giant mushrooming cloud of black smoke that billowed out and filled the entire room. Otto yowled as whatever had been boiling in the cauldron went pouring over his alligator skin shoes and steaming over the floor. He whirled and came at them with his wand. "What did you do? How did you do that? I'm going to flay the skin off your bones." And then he got close enough that Allison could pull the Princess Leia maneuver and throw the chains around his neck. She jerked them tight and dragged Otto in close as his face went purple and red, snatching the wand out of his hand. "What do I do with this thing?" she yelled at Balthazar. "Touch my chains," Balthazar yelled back, while Otto made choked, strangled noises. The wand popped open Balthazar's shackles, and white light bloomed throughout the whole room as he began to glow again. In the light, the wand seemed to writhe and squirm like a snake, shining greasily. Allison flipped it out of her hand onto the floor, and Balthazar pounced on it, touching the twisted, gnarled stick with his horn. It glowed red and smelled like rotten eggs for a moment, and then it went up in a whole bunch of colorful flames. "No!" Otto said through the chains, the O dragging out of him like the whine of a deflating balloon. It wasn't just a sound, either. He was sinking in on himself, skin going greenish white and bones toppling slowly inward as a horrible, rotting smell exploded out of him. Allison covered her mouth with one hand and then the other as she did a little frantic dance, trying to shake the chains loose of disgusting bits of Otto as he started falling apart. "Hold still, do you want me to poke an eye out?" Balthazar demanded irritably, and then he tapped the shackles on her wrists with his horn. They popped open and clattered to the floor, along with the gaping remains of Otto's skull, teeth scattering away loose over the ground. "That was so unbelievably gross," Allison said. "And I am saying that after I slept in a bus shelter yesterday." "You can throw up after we get out of here," Balthazar said, whacking the lock off the baby unicorn's cage. "Yes, yes, you're all very grateful and happy to be rescued, I know," he added to them. "I'm hungry," one of the baby unicorns said, popping out of the cage. It shook itself head to toe, the mats all fluffed out, leaving it looking a bit tufty and neat and glowing. "I want to roll in the grass," another one said. "I want some chocolate milk," another one said. Chocolate milk," all the baby unicorns said, clamoring. "Oh, don't even look at me," Allison said, as Balthazar stared at her in desperation. "I am cleaned out." "All right, no one back at the herd hears about this. You understand?" Balthazar said to the baby unicorns as they nudged and shoved against each other to get to the bowls Allison had set out. Their hooves slid and left streaks on the hardwood floor. "They really shouldn't be drinking this," he added fussily. Allison said, tipping back a glass herself. Balthazar eyed her darkly, and then he nudged her shoulder. "Give me a boat." Otto had kept a giant bag full of cash and diamonds upstairs in a wall safe that fortunately had been made out of steel to keep out burglars instead of unicorns. "So if I keep this, am I going to get into trouble or something?" Allison said, looking at the money while the unicorns finished drinking. She hadn't counted it yet, but it was crazy huge, and it was almost all in like $1,000 bills. Also, oh my God, we just killed that guy. "Well, he was fairly close to dead to begin with," Balthazar said, lifting his head and shaking chocolate milk off his nose. "So I don't think anyone is going to miss him. Give that here." He tapped the bag with his horn, and the money all riffled quietly like a deck of cards, looking somehow cleaner and more crisp. The diamonds glowed briefly. "I hope you don't plan on spending any of this soon." "What?" Allison said. "I'm certainly not herding 5 baby unicorns home alone," Balthazar said. "They'll end up in New Jersey." "So where's home, then? The Bronx?" she asked. Balthazar straightened his neck and tossed his head back a little, somehow managing to avoid putting a giant dent in the ceiling with his horn. "The entrance is in Fort Tryon Park," he said. "The entrance to what?" Allison said suspiciously. Home," Balthazar said. "Fairyland," one of the baby unicorns. "I want to go home. Fairyland, fairyland," the others chimed in. Allison looked at Balthazar. "The correct name is actually the Land of Fairy," Balthazar said stiffly, somehow managing to squash in a whole bunch of extra vowels. "Only infants and idiots call—" "All right, you know what? Just shut up and give me some more chocolate milk." The end.